Okay, good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Today we are learning Chullin. We're actually going to be learning Kuftes Zayin Amud Beis, and we're going to go to the end of the parak actually on the top of Kuf Yud Zayin Amud Beis. And then, as you can see, tomorrow night's blot is large, and we'll do as much damage as we can. I believe that tomorrow night I will not be here. I have a dinner followed by a wedding. I haven't totally worked out the logistics yet. If I'm not here, Ruvain Handler will be here, and if he's not here, my brother Howard will be here. Someone will be here. Okay, not at the wedding, no. We're starting at the Mishnah at the bottom of Kuftes Zayin Amud Aleph. These are some well-known sugyas for anyone who's learned some of the halachos of cheese. This is really one of the primary marimakomos as to whether or not it is kosher to make cheese with rennet from non-kosher animals. And what does non-kosher animals mean? Nevela versus treifa versus from avodah zarah. We're going to discuss that. We know that rennet is actually is found in the stomach lining of animals. And what they used to do is cut out the stomach of the animals. And it was actually the fourth stomach of the cow that has the rennet in it. They would put milk in, seal it on one end, seal it on the other, shake it, and it would curdle, and then they would let it cure. However, the exact process is, I don't know. But be'erech, that was how they were making cheese back in the day. Today, we make cheese with enzymes. So the process of hardening is so much faster, probably by a factor of many hundreds, if not more. And it raised a problem in the poskim around what we call hard cheese versus what we don't call hard cheese, because some of the Mefarshim say, well, if the cheese is 6 months old, so things change in modern science. And just one great shaila on this topic before we begin, I've shared this here before. There's a great shaila that came into Rav Hershel Schechter Shlita about a $5 million cheese run. Maybe it was a $10 million cheese run that was made specifically for Pesach. And some chacham found out after everything was made and packaged and ready to go that the enzyme that was used was extracted from barley. Whatever the details are, that's not a good thing to do when you're making Pesach cheese. Go find something else. There's only 5 grains on the planet that can cause for chametz. So the shaila came into Rav Hershel Schechter. Yeah, I've got millions of dollars on the line. I've laid out all this money in the hopes of selling it at whatever appropriate markup there is for Pesach. Rav Hershel Schechter quoted a shach in Yoredea. Can't remember if it was a shach or a taz. Which one's on the inner margin? I think the taz is on the inner margin. And the taz said it's the way that the enzyme was made is that the barley was dried out and then it was remoistened, then it was dried out again, and it was considered eitz ba'alma, so he was matir. So, and that's why you have to know, as he said in the shiur that I heard from him. So, what a great line. He's like, if you're going to be a Rav, you have to know every shach and every taz. I'm like, oh, no problem. Anyways, I never want to be opposing. Let's start the Mishnah. The Mishnah said, the kebas oved kochavim vishal nevela. If you have this rennet, this stomach, from an animal that is from an oved kochavim, or an animal that's a nevela, and we'll discuss why we need both of those languages, harezu asura. That is not a cheese that you are allowed to consume. Hamamid be'or shel keba. If one, the phrase of ma'amid is the process of making cheese. So hamamid, if you put milk in there, and you do it in the or of the keba, you don't just extract the rennet, it's inside a kosher animal's stomach. So now we have a potential problem of basar b'chalav, right? You're putting milk inside flesh. Stomach is flesh. It's an animal. It's a cow, right? So the halacha is kshera, turning to the top of Kufta Zayin Amud Beis. However, im yesh b'nosein tam, if the flavoring of the stomach of the animal was imparted into the milk that was to be cheese, the curdling process, if it schmecked a little bit, if when you tasted it, it tasted a little bit like the basar of that cow, so then the halacha is harezu asura, regular rules of no same time. Now everything here is cold, so it shouldn't be that there should be a transfer of time, but if there is a transfer of time, the halacha is that it's asura. Let's say there was an animal that was a kshera, so let's just say a regular goat, sheyanka mina trefa, mixed up who its mother was, and it nursed from a camel. Pretty big mix-up. These animals know who their mothers are, magically. And if an animal that's kosher nursed from an animal that's a tmeya, the halacha is kavsa asura, the rennet in that stomach lining of that kosher animal was fed by a treif milk, and therefore it's asura. The reverse, however, treifa sheyonka mina kshera. Let's say you have a non-kosher animal that nursed from a kosher animal, kavsa muteres. The exact opposite, even though the animal is a treifa, the rennet was nourished by kosher milk, and therefore it's muteres mipnei shekanus b'me'eha, because it's gathered in its stomach, meaning that we assume, again, I don't know exactly what's going on here in the Mishnah, but we assume that the rennet that's in the walls of the stomach was generated and fed and nourished by the Yon Kamena Kshera from kosher animal. So the Gemara here starts out of the gates. We'll have a couple of different answers to this question with a conclusion about which one we hold like. The Gemara here says as follows: Atu kebas oved kochavim lav nevelahi. If I have a goy, and the goy, or whatever, if I have an oved kochavim, and the oved kochavim shechts a cow, do you know what that cow is called? A nevela. What do you mean that it's kebas oved kochavim lav nevelahi? Duplicative. Save some language here. It says the Gemara, Kufta Zayin Amid Beis, 6 lines down. Says the Gemara, answer number 1. Amar Ravuna Hacha Bilokeach Gedi Mina Oved Kochavim Maskinan. I bought a gedi. I bought a little animal from an Oved Kochavim. V'chayshinan Shema Yonak Mina Trefa. Animal's kosher. My concern is that the animal might have nursed from a trefa. Says the Gemara, are you really concerned that the reason why this gedi that I bought from an akum, the reason why it's asur is because it nursed from a trefa? V'hatanya, it should be v'hatanya. That's what it says on the side over here in Os Katan Beis, based on the Gilion. The Brisa writes, Lokchim beitzim min ha'ovdei kochavim. You're allowed to take eggs from an oved kochavim. Ve'ein chosheshen lo mishum nevela v'lo mishum trefa. I went to someone's house. This woman kept referring circumcisions to me in southern Wisconsin. Wow, wonderful person. She probably referred 50 brisses within a couple of years. So I said, I'd love to meet you. I'm in Wisconsin. I drove by her house. No heating, no cooling, no air conditioning in her house. Saved a lot of money. She had a chicken farm, and she gave me 24 eggs. Every single egg had blood in them. 24 out of 24. Maybe in my lifetime, like shopping at Jewel, maybe we've seen a handful of times in our lives. Every single one had blood in it. Now, I presume it had been fertilized and it was just the beginning of free range. I presume that there was a mate, and that was why that was happening, and they caught it early enough that it wasn't a chick. This is a big shiur in postgame. Is it fleshik now? Okay, fine. Nevertheless, we're allowed to rely on that. You still have to check for blood, but we're allowed to rely on it. So says the Gemara, what we see from this brisa, which was quoted a little bit earlier, is that we're not concerned about a trefa. So how can you tell me that when the Mishnah said that the kebas oved kochavim and the nevela, both cases are necessary, because really the case of oved kochavim, Rav Huna wants to say, was a case where I purchased a gedi and the concern was that it was yonek mina trefa. We're not concerned about that, says the brisa. Says the Gemara, you're right. Not mina trefa. We're not worried about an animal eating from a trefa. We're worried about an animal eating from a tmeya. Asks the Gemara the obvious question. Umayshna trefa delo chayshinan. Why is it that the brisa from Samach Gimel that we just saw a couple of lines ago of Lokchim Beitzim Min Ovdei Kochavim, why there are we not worried about a trefa? Umayshna tmeya de chayshinan. Right? Who cares? The animal of a trefa is not kosher, and if the kosher animal nursed off of that, the rennet would be problematic for making cheese. And yet over here, we seem to say by an animal that's tmeya, we are chayshinan. So why does this make sense? Says the Gemara, trefa lo shchicha. It's not common to have a trefa. A trefa is an animal that has blemished in a certain way that it's likely to die. So that's not very common. But tmeya is shchicha. How many mammal animals are there that are not kosher out there? A lot. I'm not holding. I don't know. I'll just name 2. You got pig and you got camel. Are there any more that you know of off the cuff? I'm sure there's a lot. I don't know. I'm not holding. All of these animals are more common than trefa. So Chazal distinguished. When we are looking at the ukimta that Rav Huna wants to create, what does it mean in our Mishnah when it says a case of oved kochavim? It must be talking about a case of tmeya. Why is tmeya any worse or better than trefa? Because it's much more common. Chazal didn't just make broad stroke halachos that didn't make sense. The wisdom is literally endless, like literally. It's like the Gra says by by Mayim Megulim. Chazal only gave you one answer. There's 999 other answers as to why Kodesh Baruch Hu wanted us to not drink Mayim Megulim. If you ever visited Rav Chaim Kanievsky, when you were with him, he had a cup of water. He would take a sip. He'd put a little piece of paper over the cup. Why? We learned this in the Gemara. We learned this in Zvachim or here. I think it was here. No, it wasn't here. Because we learned that according to some Mefarshim, it's as much time as it takes for the snake to come out of a little crevice in the cup into the water and back out. I don't know if that's why he did it, but I watched him do that minute. There's 1,000 reasons why Chazal say that. What?
I'm sure.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know if it's because of the svara of the Gemara that I just said, the svara that the snake can come out of the handle, that I don't know. But I watched him do it. I watched him Be'inayim. I watched him do it. I saw other greats do similar things where they would cover their cup. So the Gemara says there's a difference when we're talking about a treifa that's lo shchiach. Chazal, we're not gozer in that case, but in a case where it is shchiach, namely if an animal's a tmei, there are a lot of tamei animals, and therefore the Gemara says we are concerned about that. That's our case in the Mishnah of Oved Kochav. Says the Gemara, well, ishchicha, if what you're saying is that animals that are tmeos are common, forget about our case of Oved Kochavim. Afilu gabi didan nechush. We should be worried about our own farms. Even animals that are not Oved Kochavim animals, they're just regular animals. But if you're concerned that a tamei animal is prevalent and found, I should therefore be concerned even without the complicating factor of avodah zarah. Says the Gemara, you don't have to worry by a Yiddish farm. Why? Anan dibidilinan minayhu. We look at a tamei animal as like, oh my gosh, it's a chazer. Like even the way we talk, like that's chazerish. That pig's getting nowhere near my farm. Not happening. When we do see that there is a tamei animal, mafreshin anlahu, we get rid of it right away. Therefore, lo gazer b'hu rabbanan. We're not worried about an animal that's tamei by a Yiddish farm. However, inhu, by the non-Jews, they don't care where the milk comes from. They're fine with camel milk or with pig milk. They don't care one drop. They're not going to send away the kosher animal from the non-kosher, from the tamei nursing, lactating animal. They don't care one drop. Therefore, they're not going to push them. Therefore, all of this is answer number one. All of this is answer number one. Rav Huna wants to say, why is it that our Mishnah says both Oved Kochavim and Nevela L'chor, they should be the same thing? Says the Gemara, we are concerned, again, based on the Shakla Bataria. Rav Huna is saying that when we talk about an Oved Kochavim, what we're concerned about is that perhaps it nursed from a tamei animal, which is something that we will be concerned about when we are not on a Yiddish farm. However, Shmuel has a different answer. We're about a third of the way down, Kuf Tezayin Base. Shmuel Amar, really chadaktani. We're reading the Mishnah wrong. If you look at the Mishnah, it appears that these are two different cases. I'll read it for you. Kebas Oved Kochavim, shel nevela. That's not really how to read it. Says the Gemara, where we are a third of the way down, Kuf Tezayin Base. Shmuel Amar chadaktani. Kebas shchitas Oved Kochavim nevela. It's one thing. It's not two cases. Says the Gemara, Umi Amar Shmuel Hachi. Is Shmuel really saying that it's all one thing, that the keba is going to be usher from a non-kosher animal? That's not necessarily true. And I'll show you from his own mouth why it's not. Amar Shmuel, Mipnei ma asru givinas ha'ovdei kochavim. Why is it that Chazal ushered us from eating cheese that was made by a goy? You go to a fancy party and they're serving wine and cheese, but there's no hechsher. Why can't you eat the cheese? Honestly, what are the ingredients? If it's kosher, let's assume you know it's cow milk. What's the problem? Says the Gemara, because even if it is a kosher milk, because they actually put the milk and whatever other ingredients they use into a stomach of an animal. When we see the language of or kebas nevela, it means into the flesh of the actual stomach of that animal that has a rennet in it. However, look at the diuk. Hakeba gufa, but the rennet itself extracted from the lining of the stomach, sharia. So now we have a problem within Shmuel. We painted Shmuel painted himself, that really making cheese in the stomach of Oved Kochavim is an avela. That sounds like the rennet is problematic. However, it's not necessarily true because the Gemara that we just quoted from him, which is the Gemara in Avodah Zarah, there the implication is the opposite, that keba is mutter, that rennet is fine. Says the Gemara, lo kasha, really Shmuel was talking about two different time frames. Kan kodem chazara, kan la'achar chazara. One is talking about before an earlier phase in the development of halacha where we assumed that rennet was aser. That would be our Mishnah and Shmuel's understanding of our Mishnah. And Kan, the Gemara that we just quoted a few lines earlier from Avodah Zarah, Lamed Hey, that was talking about la'achar chazara, after we clarified that rennet extracted from a stomach is in fact permissible. So if we were poskim and if we held like Shmuel, we are allowed to use rennet even from a non-kosher animal. We just can't put it into the stomach of a non-kosher animal. We have to make it separately.
Take it out.
However they managed to extract rennet, I have no idea how they had the sophistication to do that. You're a chemist. That sounds like a chemical process where you have to target rennet and somehow, I don't know what they did. Maybe it was way less sophisticated. Maybe they just crushed it, extracted the juice. I have no idea what they did. But it's clear from the Gemara that they had the or shel keba, putting milk in the stomach of the treif animal, no good. But then the Gemara says that the keba itself, the rennet itself, was permissible. Hafla. It's unbelievable what they were able to accomplish. Good. Another thing we saw in our Mishnah was ksheira shiyon kamina treifa. We can see this actually at the top of this page, that if a kosher animal nursed from a non-kosher animal, we said that the rennet would be problematic. And what we really need is the v'chula. You see the v'chulas in brackets there? The Gemara is very wise. That's what we're going to be focusing on. The next line, which you can see on the second line of this page, is treifa shiyon kamina ksheira kavsa muteres. That if a non-kosher animal nursed from a kosher animal, the rennet is fine. Says the Gemara, V'haktani Reisha, hold on one second. We just learned that Kebas Ovid Kochavim Vishal Nevela, Harezu Asura. How can you possibly eat from a treifa? Says the Gemara, Amar of Chizda, there's a difference between a nevela and a treifa. Reisha, when the opening of our Mishnah was discussing a nevela, that's different. Reisha, nira ke'ochel nevelos. If you're eating an animal that's a nevela, there's something disgusting about it. It's like eating carry-on. Like you're just driving down the road, you see a dead deer, you pick it up, put it in the back of your trunk, and go home and make steak. That's mius. There's something disgusting about that nevela. And therefore, we're going to say that it has a certain level of asr. However, hacha by a treifa ikashchita, that animal, at least on its face, got a regular death, a regular ritual slaughter of shchita. Amar le Rava, shouldn't it be the opposite? The lav kol dechenu, we're 2/3 of the way down on kuf tezayin amud beis, 3 lines before the wide lines. Rava said it should be the opposite. Listen to Rava's svara, brilliant. Uma nevela de me'isa, when we talk about a case of nevela, and again, a nevela is disgusting. The animal was killed in an inhumane way. The isharis lo kevasa, even if we allowed the rennet, lo asi lemechal mina, we would never eat the meat of a nevela, never. Amris lo, if there you said it's not kosher, treifa shchuta, by a treifa which was shechted properly, the isharis, if we did allow the rennet, then asi lemechal mina lo kol shekain, of course we should have a concern about that. So says the Gemara, like we said before, Hello, Amar of Yitzchak, Amar of Yochanan lo kasha, kan kodem chazara, kan la'achar chazara, Mishnah lo zazim imkoma. Well-known line, that even though we now have a clearer, better, more sophisticated understanding of the din, we're not going to go back and edit our Mishnah. We're going to leave it as is. But there was this distinction in time. We're not used to this, the whole development of halacha. We're not used to that. We don't really have that so much. Like the sefer in the 1950s that came out called Chashmal B'Shabbat was like this earth-shattering new technology. Like, how do these lights work on Shabbos? Is it like, the Gemara in Bava Kama, like chitzo mishum mamono, if I shoot an arrow and it keeps going and keeps going and keeps going, and a minute later it kills someone, am I responsible? If I turn on a switch before Shabbos and it keeps going and it keeps going, did I violate Shabbos? It's very rare that we have these like massive developments in halacha. But for them, fundamentally, there was a time when they thought rennet from a non-kosher animal was problematic, and then they changed their mind. So that's why we have these different appearances, these different marimokomas that seem to be opposite. It's really not a stira. How do we paskin? We're going to see here two shitas, not so clear. Amar Rav Chia bar Abba Amar Rav Yochanan. So this is the first sheet of Rav Yochanan. Ma'amidin bekebas nevelos. You're allowed to be mamid even in the stomach itself of a nevela. Ve'ein ma'amidin bekebas shchitas oved kochavim. He distinguishes in our Mishnah. Our Mishnah grouped them together, but here the Gemara says not like that. Here the Gemara says that one is allowed, one is not. The kebas nevelos is allowed, and the Keva Shchita Sova Kochav is not. Amar Lefanav Reb Shimon Bar Abba Keman Rabbi Elazar. Are you saying that this is like Rabbi Elazar? The Amar Stam Machshava Sova Kochavim Lavodas Kochavim. Are you saying that we hold like Rabbi Eliezer, who holds that the average akum has a mindset for avodas kochavim? Amar Le ve'ela Keman. Of course, that's who I hold like. What other option is there? Yes, I hold like Rabbi Eliezer. All of that is approach number one to psak, that we make this distinction between the stomach of an avela that's mutter and the stomach of shchita sovek kochavim, that's not. And ki aser of Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak Amar Rav Yochanan. So we have two shitas within Rav Yochanan. How do we understand this? As the Gemara, ma'amidin bein bekevas nevelo, bein bekevas shchita sovek kochavim shelo lachosh shadu Rabbi Eliezer. Both are mutter. You're allowed to make cheese that way. V'hilchasa, how do we paskin? Ein ma'amidin be or kevas nevela. You're not allowed to put it actually inside the stomach of the nevela. Aval ma'amidin be kebas nevela. You can't put it in the or kebas nevela, but you can use the rennet from the nevela, and as well the rennet from an animal that's ove kochavim. That's the distinction to be made here. Big machlokos rishonim about the next two lines, but we are not going to learn them. That brings us to the next Mishnah, which is on the bottom of Kufta Zayin Amud Beis, which really deviates a little bit. We're not going to be talking about cheese anymore. We're done with that sugya. And right now what we're going to be discussing is distinctions between chelev and dam. The reason this is an important conversation is because sometimes we view the whole animal as one entity. The halachic status of the basar is the same as the dam, is the same as the chelev. And let's say the animal is not kosher, all three of them are asur. No, they all have different halachos. So let's learn this. Chomer bechelev mi bedam. There's something that's uniquely strict about chelev that is not strict about dam, and v'chomer bedam mi bechelev. And as well, there are things that are strict about dam, there are chumras by dam that don't apply by chelev. Let's jump in. Last three words on the page. Chomer b'chelev. What is it that's strict about chelev that's not strict about dam? Says the Gemara, shehachelev, when we talk about chelev, and these are the parts of the behemoth that are inedible to us, the halacha is that mo'al and bo, there can be me'ila, misappropriation, v'chayav and alav mishum pigul v'nosar v'tameh. And for a korban that has to be finished in a certain time, or let's go in order, that you have to have an appropriate machshava, or you can't have an inappropriate machshava, nosar, or if you ate it tameh, all of those things apply by chelev. Masha'ein kain b'dam. But that's not true in regards to dam. By dam, we don't have me'ila. By dam, we don't have pigul. And by dam, we don't have nosar. And by dam, we don't have a din of if I'm tameh as a kohen, I'm not allowed to eat it. Of course, I'm not allowed to eat dam. But there isn't the secondary isser of me being a tameh kohen. We'll get into some of these halachos in the Gemara. So that's the first half of the Mishnah, the chomer of bechelev mi bedam. Now let's flip to Isser Chalal Isser, you're talking about? Right. Potentially. We'll see that the answer is yes, that would we stack them? We already learned the sugya of Isser Chalal Isser extensively in the last 10 blot really. But in theory, that would be an appropriate question here. Then the Gemara says on Kuf Yud Zayin and Aleph on the second line, V'chomer b'dam, what is uniquely strict about dam that isn't true about chelev? Shadam, the isser of achilas dam is noeg bebehema, v'chaya, v'of. It applies broadly to all three animals, bein tmein uvein tahorin, whether or not the animal is tamei or tahor. However, v'chelev, eino noeg ele bebehema, and one that is tahora bilvad. It's way stricter to have dam, because dam is usher everywhere, and chelev is only usher in literally one iteration, one permutation, which is a behema as opposed to chayav oaf, and a behema that is tahora as opposed to tameh. Super narrow scope of isser when it comes to the isser of dam. Says the Gemara Minohani Mili, and Rashi over here, thank you, we learned like 12 halachos in this Mishnah. You can't just say Minohani Mili. The rest of us don't know what you're talking about. Minohani Mili what? So Rashi says on the 7th line of the page, How do we know that chaylev has a status of me'ila? I might have thought, what's the havamina? There should be no chaylev. There should be no me'ila by chaylev. I don't eat chaylev. Chaylev's usher to eat. Says the Gemara, and I'll say out of the gates, this answer is a difficult answer for us because it requires a lot of time to unpack. So I'll do my best to be clear without fully unpacking because we're not going to learn this sugya. But this is a Gemara that we learned in Zvachim. Amar Rav Yanai, the Amar Kra, the pasuk says in regards to the Par Kohen Gadol, in regards to the cow that the Kohen Gadol brought on Yom Kippur, the pasuk says, "Kasher you ram," just like you brought Mishor Zevach Hashlamim, so too you should do by the Par Kohen Gadol. Says the Gemara, "V'chima lamadnu Mishor Zevach Hashlamim." I don't need to learn anything from Par Zevach Shlamim back to Par Kohen Gadol. That's extraneous. We already know all the halachos that we need from Par Kohen Gadol. I don't need it. I don't need to learn anything from Shor Zevach Hashlamim, like the pasuk seems to say. So me'ata, if that's true, what do we do with this extra connection that the pasuk makes between the Par Kohen Gadol and the Shor Zevach Hashlamim? Says the Gemara, me'ata harezeh ba lalamid v'nim salamed. Now we have to reverse the limud. And what we do is instead of learning from Shor Zevach Hashlamim to Par Kohen Gadol, we reverse it and learn from Par Kohen Gadol to Shor Zevach Shlamim. Makish Shor Zevach Hashlamim lepar Kohen Mashiach. What do we learn from one to the other? Ma Par Kohen Mashiach yesh bo me'ila. Now we can see where we're getting back to the answer of our question of how do we know that chaylev has me'ila. Just like the Par Kohen Mashiach has me'ila, af Shor Zevach Hashlamim, this behema yesh bo me'ila, and seemingly the chaylev too. So this is a difficult Gemara. It requires us to understand the other sugya of Par Kohen Mashiach, which we don't know off the top of our heads. And why is it that we have nothing to learn from Shor Zevach Shlamim? What's the syntax of the pasuk? That seems a little bit odd. That's its own sugya. But this really is answer number one as to how we know that there is an isser of me'ila by chaylev. So says the Gemara, a quarter of the way down, Amar le Reb Chanina, Ke'ura zu Shoshana Rebbe. We just saw this language now, just a couple of blot ago. You don't like the answer that Rebbe gave? Reb Chanina is pushing back on Rav Yanai. Rav Yanai gave an answer. What do you mean? Rav Yanai, you're an Amora. I have a beautiful Mari Makom from Rebbe, who wrote the Mishnayos. You're going to sit here and give me. Rebbe already gave an answer. What was Rebbe's answer? So the Rebbe's answer is based on a pasuk in Vayikra Perek Gimel. The pasuk in Vayikra Perek Gimel says, "V'hikti Ram HaKohen HaMizbecha Lechem Ishe L'Reach Nichoach Kol Chelev LaHashem." All the Chelev is to Hashem. L'Rabos Emurei Kodshim Kalem L'Me'ila. Even the Emurim, even the Chelevs, even the innards, the pieces that are not the basar. Guess what? There's the din me'ila. So says the Gemara, says Reb Chanina to Rav Yanai, why aren't you using the Mari Makom of Reb Yehuda Nasi? Rebbe already told us that there's chaylev and that chaylev has a din of me'ila. So says the Gemara, interestingly, it isn't Rav Yanai who answers the question. Abaye to the rescue. Amar Abaye, a third of the way down. Itztrich. We need both Mar Mikomos. We need the answer of Rav Yanai from the pasuk of Par Kohen Mashiach, and we need the answer of Rebbe from the pasuk of Kol Chelev LaHashem. And here's why. Says the Gemara: V'hikas of Rachmana only Chelev. If I would have only had the pasuk of Rebbe of Kol Chelev LaHashem, that the Emurim, namely the Chelev, has a din of Nevela, have a Chelev in, I might have thought that only the Chelev qualifies for the Isser of Me'ila, but Yoseres, Ushte Kiloyos, other innards of the animal that aren't Basar, would not have been included in the Isser of Me'ila. Kamash Malan Lo, you might have thought that's the case, therefore Kasav Rachmana Ka'asher Yura. Abaye points out that there was a concern with Rebbe's response. When Rebbe tried to say that Chelev was included in Me'ila, you're right, that's clear, but there was a secondary issue which wasn't clear, which was the Yoseres and Shtei Kleos. Would those be chayiv in Me'ila? If you only had Rebbe's drush of Kol Chelev LaHashem, I would have been confused. Therefore, says Abaye, we needed the drush of Rav Yanai to say that that it applies even to the Yoseres and Shtei Kleos. And V'ikas of Rachmana Ka'asher Yuram. If I only would have had the pasuk that Rav Yanai brought the first answer at the open of the Gemara 5 lines down, and I didn't have Rebbe, Havamina Chelev Al Yod Leise B'Shor Lo, I might have thought that the Chelev that's on the tail of the animal, which doesn't exist by a shore, cows don't have those tails, so therefore I might have thought that there wouldn't have been a din of Me'ila, therefore Kasav Rachmana Kol Chelev. So a little difficult to understand Rebbe because the way Rebbe structures his limud is that it only seems to apply to Chelev, but not to Yoseres and Shtei Kles. So that's why we needed both psukim. That's why Rav Yanai just couldn't embrace out of the gates the shita of Rebbe. Says the Gemara, Omar le Rav Mari le Rav Zvid, I aliyah ikri Chelev tis sar be'achila. Wait one second. Wait one second. We know that the Chelev of a behemoth is usher to eat. But if the way we refer to the tail and the fat that's on it is the chelev ha'aliyah, so then why isn't the tail usher to eat? Should be usher, but it's not. So Amar le alecha Amar kra kol chelev shor v'chesed v'eiz davar hashaveh b'shor v'chesed v'eiz. The only types of chelev, says the Gemara, the only types of chelev that are usher are chelev that exist in all categories of animal. But some animals don't have a tail. They don't have the chelev ha'aliyah. And therefore, that can't be the isser and chumash of eating chelev. That is what the Gemara says. Fine. The second answer to this question of why isn't the chelev of the tail aser? We saw the first answer is that it has to be shaveh l'chol davar. It has to apply everywhere. Rav Ashi Amar chelbo ha'aliyah ikri. It's not called chelev on its own. It has a more specific name. It's chelbo ha'aliyah. It's called tail fat. But chelev stama lo ikri, that's not what it's called. Says the Gemara, wait one second. Elameyata lo yimaluba. If what you're saying is that it's not called regular chelev and the tail is called chelbo ha'aliyah, maybe there's no din me'ila there because it's not called chelev, it's called something else, chelbo ha'aliyah. You're right, we can't accept Rav Ashi's answer. Kid Rav Zvid, we fall back on Rav Zvid's answer. That the reason why we know that the chelev ha'aliyah is not going to be part of the general isra of achilas chelev of a behema is because it's not davar hashaveh b'shor v'chesed v'eiz, because not all animals have tails. Now, we had said in our Mishnah, Masha Ein King B'dam, we said in our Mishnah that Me'ila and Pigul and Nosar and a Kohen who's Tameh, that those things apply to Chelev, and then the Gemara said Masha Ein King B'dam. Says the Gemara, Minna Hani Mili. How do we know, says the Gemara, that there's no Me'ila by blood? Because that's what the top words of this page said, is that Shechelev Ma'alin Bo V'chayavim, but not Dam. How do you know that blood doesn't have a din Me'ila? What if I misappropriate blood? So says the Gemara, Amar Ula. We're going to see three quick rapid answers. Amar Ula, Damar Kra, Lachem, Shelachem Yehei. The blood is not the Eibishter's. The blood, there's no din of Me'ila. Me'ila applies for something that belongs to the Beis HaMikdash and you misappropriate it. Dam has a din of Shelachem. Now, obviously you can't eat it, but it has a din of shalachem, and therefore there's no isser me'ila. That's answer number one. Answer number two, debei Rabbi Shmuel Tana, we have a brisa. The pasuk says lechaper, long pasuk in Vayikra Yud Zayin, just quoting Al Mizbech, lechaper al nafsho seichem. What is the point of the blood? The point of the blood is to generate kapara. L'chapar nesati v'lo le'me'ila. Answer number two, black on white. This brisa from Rabbi Shmuel is super clear. How do we know that there is no me'ila by dam? Because the pasuk says l'chapar, that's the point of the blood. And 2/3 of the way down, almost, the Gemara says our third answer as to how we know that blood has no me'ila. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Kra, who lifnei kapara, kila achar kapara. It is before kapara. Blood is before kapara like it is after kapara. Meaning, the status of blood before kapara is like the status of blood afterwards. Male achar kapara ein bo me'ila. After I do zrikas hadam, the remnants of the blood, there is no din me'ila. I already finished Avar Zman Abat Korbano. I'm done with the blood. Af lifnei kapara ein bo me'ila. So Rav Yochanan gives our third and final answer as to how we know that there is no me'ila by blood. Then says the Gemara, Ve'ema hu la'achar kapara kalifnei kapara. You made a comparison, Rav Yochanan, that the status of blood before the Zrikas Hadam is the same as the status after. Why not learn it the other way? Why don't we say the status after Zrikas Hadam is like the status before Zrikas Hadam, and what would that look like? Ma'lifnei kapara yesh bo me'ila, af la'achar kapara yesh bo me'ila. Maybe I could have argued that before I do Zrikas Hadam, the dam does have a din of Me'ila because I didn't do Kapara yet. Says the Gemara, we can't do that. Why? And this is a Gemara that we learned many moons ago in Maseches Sukkah. Ein lecha davar shenase mitzvaso umo alinbo. Principle. There's a principle of the Gemara. You can't have Me'ila with an item that had a mitzvah completed already. So once the Zrikas Hadam was done, we are therefore not going to have any din of Me'ilah. Says the Gemara, below, I'm going to question that principle as we did in Maseches Sukkah. Even after you remove the ash from the Mizbeach, there still is a din Me'ilah. Says the Gemara, great question. You're right. There's still, it appears there still is a din of Me'ilah by Trumas Hadeshen, but says the Gemara, it's not a good question for a different reason. You're right, there is Me'ilah, but it's not a kasha on our case of blood, because Mishum Dahava'e, Trumas Hadeshen u Bigdei Kahuna, Shnei Ksuvin Abayin Ke'echad. The din of Trumas Hadeshen and the din of Bigdei Kahuna, when the Kohen Gadol takes off his clothes, those two cases are Shnei Ksuvin Abayin Ke'echad. They have the same din that they are going to be usher to use. V'chol Shnei Ksuvin Abayin Ke'echad ein malamdin. You're right. You're 100% right. When I said the rule that with the completion of a mitzvah there is no more me'ilah, I meant most things, but there are two exceptions to the rule, which is the Trumas Hadeshen and the Bigdei Kahuna. Says the Gemara, that's a very good argument. That's fine according to the Rabbanon, who hold that when it comes to the Bigdei Kahuna, when he takes them off, they have to be buried because they're usher to use again. That's fine. But according to Reb Dosa, who says no, the only restriction with the Bigdei Kahuna is that they can't be used for another Yom Kippur. But once the Kohen Gadol takes them off, they can be used by a regular Kohen Hedyot, no problem at all. So then by him, there is no Din Me'ilah. Now it's not Shnei Ksuvin Abayin Ke'echad, and if it's not Shnei Ksuvin Abayin Ke'echad, then Trumas Hadeshen is a kasha on our assumption that there is no Me'ilah for Dam after Zrikas Hadam. Ma'ika Lememar. So says the Gemara, Ella, you're 100% right. Good argument. We can't learn anything from Bigdei Kahuna. Ella says the Gemara, Mishum dehava'e, 4 lines from the bottom. Trumas Hadeshen ve'egla arufa shnei ksuvin abayin ke'echad. Those two are the unique cases. V'chol shnei ksuvin abayin ke'echad ein malamd, and therefore we cannot learn from Trumas Hadeshen. So says the Gemara, 2 lines from the bottom on Kufyat Zayin Manav. Hanich, I could understand what you're saying. L'man damar ein malamd. I agree that when we talk about shnei ksuvin abayin ke'echad, says the Gemara, I understand if you say that we cannot learn from a case of Shnei Ksuvin Abayin Ke'echad. But according to those who say that you're allowed to learn from a case of Shnei Ksuvin Abayin Ke'echad, even if you have a picture-perfect Shnei Ksuvin Abayin Ke'echad and Trumas Hadeshen Negla Arufa, that's great. But if you are malamdin, then why is it that we can't apply that to another case? And then, perhaps, maybe your approach of saying that, no, after Zrikas Hadam, it's not possible to have Me'ilah. Maybe there is a possibility to have Me'ilah, just like by Trumas Hadeshen. Says the Gemara, you're right. But our answer is coming from a different place. As we turn to the top of Kufyat Zayin, Amud Beis, Trey, Mi'ute Ksive. Really, Rashi paints this beautifully. Hani ein malamdin. Even though in general the Shita will hold Shnei Ksuvin Abayin Ke'echad is malamdin, it doesn't matter. Because here the Torah went out of its way to create exclusions about those cases, which leaves them as the exception and not the rule. And therefore, we'll see the Psukim in a second, therefore, the case of Trumas Hadeshen and the case of Egla Arufa are unique cases that cannot be learned from, even though in general, according to the Shita of Shnei Ksuvin Abayin Ke'echad is malamdin, here we are not. What are the psukim? Hacha ksiv v'samo. Here we're talking about the pasuk of Trumas Hadeshen v'samo etzel hamizbeach, and therefore that's a very specific language. Therefore, you cannot learn from there to anything else. And hasam ksiv ha'arufa, the hay. The hay is a strong one. You could have just said arufa. Arufa, the. Therefore, it's isolated. You cannot learn from here. Asks the Gemara. Do you remember on the previous page we brought 3 different psukim to try and explain about how we know that there's no din of me'ilah by dam? What were the words? Lachem, lechaper, and hu. So says the Gemara, we're just about at the end of the parak over here. We're on the second line of the page. Why is it that I have lachem? Why is it that I have hu? Why is it that I have, what was the third one? Lachem, lechaper, and hu. Why? Says the Gemara, Chad le'me'ute minosar. One is to say that when it comes to dam, there is no din of nosar. You leave the meat out, you got a problem of nosar. If the blood stays out, you don't have a problem of nosar. V'chad le'me'ute mi'ila, which is what we were talking about. And v'chad le'me'ute mitumas, to say that if a person was tameh and they ate blood, so the isser of blood is problematic, but that's not the isser of a kohen who's tameh eating hektish. Aval mi pigul lo tzarich kra. But when it comes to pigul, I don't even need a kra. I don't even need a pasuk when it comes to pigul, which is of course an inappropriate machshava of eating it mibachutz, whatever the case may be. That's not, because we have a Mishnah, one that we saw in Zvachim a couple of months ago. Kol sheyesh lo matirin. Bain le'adam uvein lemizbeach chayavan al mishum pigul. The dam gufei matir. That when it comes to something that has a matir, so let's say there's meat, and I can be matir the meat with blood. So whether we're talking about a person, whether we're talking about the mizbeach, then there's pigul. But dam is that thing which is matir. So because it is that thing that's matir, by definition, it cannot be pigul. That Baruch Hashem brings us to the end of the parak. Hadron Allah kol abasar. Yiratzon, we should come back to this parak in 7.5 years. And Yirtzon Hashem, tomorrow we will start with Daf Kuf Yud Zayin and the new parak, the parak of Ha'or v'Harotev. Wishing you all a beautiful night.